My Childhood Friend's Father by Rob666 Boss. So here's some backstory before I begin. These events started when I was in 2nd or 3rd grade in 2002 or 3. They ended during the fall of 2015. I am a 21-year-old female living in Canada, and for reference, RCMP means Royal Canadian Mounted Police. When I was in elementary school, I was friends with a girl named Jessica. We had a group of 5 or 6 girls that we played with. Jessica's parents were divorced, and I often went over to her dad's house after school because they had a trampoline and a slide. Her dad was a totally normal dude. His name was Richard, and he held a job as a pilot, which definitely requires some mental stability. Jessica would also come over to my house sometimes, and her dad would always come over to pick her up after a play date, so he was familiar with where I lived. I think in the 2nd or 3rd grade, Jessica moved away to live with her mum. I didn't fully understand what was going on as a child, and I still don't know what happened, but something gone wrong with her father. We didn't hear much from Jessica, but around her birthday the following year, Richard invited our group of girls over to a surprise birthday party. We arrived at the party and we were waiting for Jessica so we could surprise her, but Jessica never showed up. We were hanging out with her dad for a while. As a child, it didn't seem as weird as it does to me now. When our parents arrived, we explained to them what had happened, and we didn't hang out again with Jessica or Richard ever. After that, some of the girls started receiving presents from Richard at their homes. I never received them, but my mum told me about it years later. The presents usually consisted of cheap jewellery and notes. I have no idea what the note said though. I'm sure that I don't want to. After this, Richard goes away, and my mum later tells me that he went to a mental institution. Years go by. I had completely forgot about the whole situation. Then, in the winter of 2013, I was out of town for a cheer competition. I was scrolling through Facebook one night when all of a sudden a new group chat popped up with 5 girls from the elementary school I went to. I had not kept in touch with any of them, so this was weird. The chat was about how they had received messages from Richard on Facebook. I checked the other folder on my Facebook messages, and sure enough, I had some too. I had a variety of messages that did not make a lot of sense, including some strange poems. Many of the messages were descriptions of dreams he had about me. Though some of them were nonsense, others were very weird, and I felt threatened by them. I didn't feel comfortable sharing some of them because they were more explicit, but here's a couple of the shorter and less scary messages. Hi girl from not that long ago. Pristine of pristeiness, I want you to know that I want you. We're gonna have planets to go to someday, provided that you don't melt them first. I'm so proud of you. Stay happy, and I haven't found a way to keep you off my mind at all. Now I can't see planets till I make you all mine, so you're just so rough, and oh you're just fine. As if I'm there, my love for you, for I share. It's indefinite, for it's all about you, that's all I care. Oh my goodness for your whipping cream containers. I clicked on Richard's Facebook profile, and his whole profile was dedicated to us 5 girls. He didn't have any friends added, so clearly nobody had seen it. Unfortunately, we didn't have very good security settings on Facebook. He saved dozens of photos of us, then reposted them with non-sensual and inappropriate captions. The captions range from essays about his love for us to a 1-sentence caption that simply said, "She's so ugly." Here are some of the shorter photo captions. Emily, hopefully you're not too soon. I'm gonna go and find out your 5188XYY, and I'm going to show up as a man that knocks on your front doorstep and bite your bottom lip off before you can say a word. Sierra, because my initial Erophia turns into sunken depression when I realise that there's nothing I can do about you besides you, because You're inside me and I can't get you out of my mind. I just love you so much. Melissa, can I paint your picture, and I want to lift you around to see how heavy that you actually are, as well as go for a drive on the Hollywood Drive with the windows rolled up, so that way we can just get a crystal clear view. Give it up like as if I'm gonna pretend I like it, besides you're just yanking on my strings, cause time after time it gets always the same common denominator, which I noticed how, come on, you all pluck your eyebrows, but I'm gonna pretend I have favourite things, but in reality I really don't need them, and you know that I'm a good liar. I have a criminal mind like all of yours. We were all 18 at the time, so we really didn't know what to do, so my mum contacted the RCMP. They told us to block Richard on Facebook, but not to reply, as the messages could be used as evidence. He continued to send us messages every single day, and we shared the screenshots with each other in the group chat and sent them off to the police. He had several different Facebook accounts that were all variations of his name, along with some randomly named ones. One of the girls decided to get into contact with Jessica to find out if she still had contact with her father. Apparently she only saw him on supervised visits every once in a while. She was very embarrassed and apologized a lot. She was a very nice person though, and obviously none of us were upset at her in any way because it wasn't her fault and she was so nice. Eventually, Richard was charged with 5 counts of criminal harassment. He pled guilty and went to jail for around 5 months. When he got out, there was still a no contact order in place, meaning that he could not contact any of us girls or come within a certain radius of our homes. He was not allowed to use the internet either. I'm not sure how all of this works, but this is what the constable handling the case told me. However, not surprisingly, he started contacting us on Facebook again. He went back to jail for breaching his probation. Fast forward to the summer of 2015, he got out. I started receiving more messages. I immediately wrote on the group chat to see if any other girls had gotten any. They hadn't. It was just me. I then immediately contacted the police. It seems that they had forgotten to include my name on the no contact order. He knew not to contact any other girls, but still thought it was safe for him to try and contact me. This time, things only got worse. It had just started when I was working at my new job, and being the idiot I am, I had my workplace public on Facebook. One day, I come into work and there was this package waiting for me. Obviously, I was really confused by this because I would never have had anything ordered to my work. So I decided I was going to open it up with my managers, and there was weed inside along with a disc with encryption software on it. He had mailed it to my work and the weed. I knew immediately that this was him, and I awkwardly explained the situation to my managers, who thought it was hilarious. The security in my office tower was alerted and given a photo of him. They began walking me to my bus stop after my shifts too. It was scary knowing that he knew I worked there. At this point, I hadn't seen him in literally years, but it was clear that he was mentally unwell. I also literally had no idea what he was capable of or what his motives were. This RCMP did not seem to take this case very seriously. They did move, but very slowly, passing the case around to various offices. Meanwhile, I was terrified. I could hardly walk down my streets at night without freaking out. Every time somebody knocked on my door while I was home alone, I would drop whatever I was doing to hide under the kitchen counters. I had not moved since I was a child, so it was a very possible thing that he knew where I lived. The packages kept on coming. I received more weed in several different forms, including cookies, which appeared to be cocaine, and a key to his apartment. There were also some other miscellaneous items. I opened up all of the packages at the police station. One of the packages included a USB stick with a bunch of audio recordings on them, but I decided it was better for me not to listen to them. The return address on the package was a random post box in another city that didn't belong to Richard. Also, there were no fingerprints ever found on any of this somehow. During the whole time, the Facebook messages remained constant. Luckily, in one of the messages he informed me that he had sent me drugs and the key along with them had his home address. The confirmed packages were actually from him. They traced it back and eventually he was charged again. I received a subpoena in the mail to appear as a witness in court. However, he once again pled guilty and I never got to go to court. I was actually a bit disappointed, as I thought seeing him in person would provide me some form of closure. He's still locked up somewhere as I'm writing this, but I still get scared walking at night or when somebody knocks on my door. The police provided me zero information on where he was being held or when he would be released. I feel like I'm just waiting for the day that he will contact me again. It seems as if every time I think it's over, it isn't. If I do hear from him again, I'll be sure to keep everyone updated. The situation could have been a lot worse. As far as I know, he didn't physically follow me or anything, but I don't know. The uncertainty kills me. They Just Wanted to Talk by Blue Moon. My story takes place 19 years ago. I am a female and I was 16 at the time. I'm 5'7", I was about 130 pounds, and I like to think that I'm strong, but I couldn't take on two young men. So it begins with my mother and stepmother going away on vacation and leaving my 17-year-old sister and I alone. They did this quite often. My parents were not winning any parenting awards, to be honest. My sister and I didn't really get along either. She was a nasty piece of work. Luckily, she decided to go stay at a friend's house while my parents were away. I was nervous about being alone, so I had my boyfriend staying with me. He was kind of not nice either, but I'm glad he was there. On one night, Brett and I were at my house, and we had just started messing around when I heard the really loud knock on the door. My room was in the basement, but at the landing area between the stairs, you know, like where you have some staircases are broken up, there's a window that I could see the stairs out of that led up to the porch, and I could see two people standing there. And just as I was peeking out to see them better, one of them saw me. I remember feeling the breath being sucked out of my chest as there were two young men standing there on my porch. It was almost midnight. I had no idea who the hell they were. The guy that saw me let his friend know, and they both looked in the window and asked me to come to the door. My boyfriend had went upstairs to open the door, and I remembered freaking out because I told him not to. He was one of those guys who thought he was Mr. Tough Guy and believed that he could fight anyone. He was telling the guys to leave as I joined him at the door. Then they called me by my name and asked me to let them in. Brett told them to go away, and one guy, I think his name was Les or something, said something like, "Come outside, we just want to talk to you." So my boyfriend and I said, "No thanks, we're going to bed," and shut the door, and I was really confused and getting frightened. They stood on my doorstep for a few minutes and started knocking again. Then they explained to me through the door that he was my sister's friend and that she had told him I was alone and that they should come by. I knew my sister and I believed them. That did not, however, make me stupid, so I told them to leave. They then started kicking the door and I was shaking. I started seriously fearing that it wouldn't hold up. I was so scared that I ran into my kitchen to call the police. I assured them that they would be there very soon, and they told me to lock the door and stay on the phone. Meanwhile, Brett was yelling at them, which only served to annoy them more. I begged him to shut up, but he wouldn't listen to me. I was locking all of the windows and doors upstairs while Brett was downstairs making sure everything was locked. Down in the basement there was a huge mud area, and it had a thick wooden door made out of 2x4 planks, kind of like an old barn door. The door had a big old lock on it, some spring-loaded turnbolt, and had a plank set across it like a barricade. One of the guys was pounding on this door, and Brett heard him tell the other guy to go to the back door. The stupid door was one of those 1960s things that had a little square window right at face level with a little curtain across it. I was at this door trying to jam a chair under it because the frisky knob didn't look like it was going to hold up, and when I looked up I saw the unnamed guy just staring at me. I screamed and the dispatcher asked me if I was okay. I barely squeaked out that one of the guys was looking at me through the window. He was older than me, probably about 20, and was tall, and he looked scary as hell. His dark eyes were drilling into me, and he wore this creepy smile on his face. I had never seen this man before, but he knew my name. He then started to tap on the window with one finger, never breaking eye contact, and said, "Becky, let me in." I couldn't breathe. The knob was rattling as he was messing around with it, and he said, "Let me in, Becky. I want to make sure you're alright. Just let me talk." He then proceeded to just continually stare at me. I was just 3 feet from him with my back pressed to the fridge when he suddenly started beating on the door and screamed, "Let me in the house. If I have to break in, I'm gonna kill both of you. So just open the door." He looked maniacal. Then there was a loud knock on the front door and the man went silent. He gave me the most hateful scenario I've ever seen. I heard shouting and he ran down the back stairs and into the woods along the back part of my yard. Brett had gone to the door and it was the cops. There were 2 female officers at the front door. One was just standing there, starting to raise her voice asking where I was and to come to the door. I was so relieved I started sobbing. I told them that they had ran away across through the woods. Luckily, the woods weren't very deep. They actually ran along a bank of a large river, and there was a bridge just up from where the woods met the road, and the officers went back round. While one stayed to get a description and take my statement, the other officer came back to then speak to Officer 2. Apparently, she saw them running across a bridge and they both left in a hurry, hopped in a cruiser and just sped off. I was still crying and shaking because I was absolutely furious at Brett for riding them up. I went to make myself some tea, thinking of all the ways I could kill my sister when she got home. I had so much anger, fear and adrenaline pumping throughout me that I could have ripped her to shreds at that moment. 20 minutes later the cruiser came back. There were 2 guys sitting in the back seat and the officers wanted us to confirm that they was the right guys. I looked through the window and saw them. They still looked terrifying to me. They were in cuffs and couldn't actually get me, but I would not want to get close. Neither would look at me. I confirmed it was them and we spoke a bit. I told the cops about my sister, suggesting that these 2 men should come see me. Officer number 2 mumbled, "Why would she do that?" I had agreed. I pressed charges for attempted forced entry, property damage, as I had actually broke a window in the living room, trespassing, disorderly conduct and attempted assault. Initially, they both pled not guilty, but later admitted to some of the charges and they both got 18 months in jail and were forbidden to contact me or my boyfriend ever again and stay at least 500 meters away. I never heard from it again though. Men in the Woods by Nordic Nonsense. Recently, and I mean like 8 months ago, I moved to an island in the South Pacific and have gotten the hiking bug, so I tried to get out to new locations as much as I possibly can with the work eating into my precious time. This happened about 2 weeks ago. Since I live in the South Pacific region, it gets mightily hot, driving all by the most insane hikers indoors unless it's night. Of course, I am no masochist, so I'll try to do all of my hiking in the early hours of the morning or in the evening when it starts getting cool. I've never been afraid of going hiking alone by myself. I did it when I lived in Oregon and never ran into any problems with it, but my island isn't my friendly home state. I always carry pepper spray when I used to go out hiking in Montana and Wyoming, sometimes carrying a handgun to ward off anything I could, or take whatever action I needed if it was a bear or a person. But I'd always gotten off considerably lucky. I go to the trailhead at 6:30 in the evening. The trail was called 1,000 Steps, but in all honesty, it was mostly just a walk straight down the cliff and then a grueling journey back up. I didn't want to go, but my dog, Mad Moxie, needed to walk, and I had done hiking so many times I could probably do it in my sleep. The first thing I noticed when I pulled up was an old rickety, rusted out blue pickup truck with a big plastic trap over the bed to keep out the rain. These are pretty common on the islands, affectionately earning them the name of gum bombs. I don't think I liked it as much as I hooked up with Moxie and started heading down the trail, trying my best to ignore the mosquitoes that were making a meal out of my exposed neck. Heading down the trail was relatively easy, avoiding the banana spider webs. I felt the stress of the day slowly unwinding as the underbush grew darker and the night slowly approached. I made it all the way down the water's edge when I noticed that there was a man standing about 100 yards away. It was dark enough now that I could see his silhouette, so I have no idea if he was looking at me or the water, but I chose just to ignore him and instead pull on Moxie's ball from my backpack and threw it a few times so she could go and get it. After some time, the guy started walking over to me. He was now about maybe 10 feet away. Now, I'm no tiny woman. I'm 23 years old and I stand at about 5'6". And this guy was a couple of inches taller than me, but most of the locals were on the smaller side. But something just felt weird. Eventually, I had just greeted him and nodded saying evening, and looked down at Moxie, who had just returned from finding her ball. I stopped down to pet her now sweating head and kept an eye on this guy. "Can I help you, sir?" "Pretty dog," he responded mildly. "You alone?" "I have my dog," I said tamely, trying to sound braver than I was feeling. "I'm never alone." I tried to emphasize on the fact that I had my dog with me, but the man seemed unfazed by my statement. "Alright then, you have a good night." With that, he turned around and started walking back towards the trailhead. I watched his shadow disappear into the trees and waited for about half an hour before I started walking back towards the path. My mind on high alert as Moxie pulled me through the trees and up the cliffside. The crickets then began to pierce the night as I climbed up the steps, which was illuminated by my flashlight. My hands were full with Moxie's leash and my light, but you could bet your life that I would still have been able to get out the pepper spray as quickly as I needed. Finally, my light pierced the trees at the top and I practically booked it up the hill. When I got to the top of the hill, I nearly had a heart attack. The blue rusted pickup truck was sitting in the parking lot still, but all their passenger side doors was practically touching my driver's side door. Inside the car, I could faintly see two men sitting in the cab. I could feel they were watching me. Slowly, I approached the car, walking as far over the passenger's side as I could, and I kept Moxie with me, as close as I possibly could as I opened the door and crawled over to the driver's seat. At that moment, the door of the pickup flung open and my dog started going crazy, barking at the two guys who were now outside of their car, trying to break into mine. Heart in chest, I rammed the keys into the ignition and tore out of the parking lot quickly. I nearly took my mirror off. I called my mum as soon as I got home and she begged me to call the police. Unfortunately, the police here on an island aren't as vigilant as they are on mainland, and that area is known for car thefts, muggings, and other things, as I learnt from my co-workers later that week. Earlier this month, another girl actually disappeared from that area with no trace, and it makes me wonder if the men in the blue pickup truck didn't have anything to do with it. If I didn't have my dog with me, I could have probably got mugged or something much worse. A Veteran's Road Rage by Bitchin' Donuts 127. Backstory: I was a senior in high school 2014 and I'm female. I just turned 17 3 months prior due to starting kindergarten early because of my birthday in the state that I lived in at the time. Point is, I was young. My dad just unexpectedly passed away a week before this incident. The Friday was my first day back at school, and yes, my mother made me come back to school less than a week after I found out about my dad's passing. So I totally wasn't ready for it, more like forced to act normal. I do think that this played a big part in my reaction. I went to VUTech. For those of you who don't know, I had half of the day devoted to a specific trade, cutting my actual time in high school classes in half. After lunch, all of the tech students would get on the bus and drive to tech. I was one of the only few who was actually allowed to drive to tech because I had a job that sometimes started at the end of my school day and I was allowed to leave early to go to work. Now to my story. It was a semi-normal day, even though I just went through the most traumatic event of my life a week ago. The teachers sent an email of what had happened with my dad. Fellow students ended up finding out. Everybody would ask me if I was alright and saying that I needed to go home. I was pretty much emotionless after spending a whole week crying. I just wanted to get over it and wanted to go through the day. After lunch, I get back to my car and head to tech. I enjoyed tech a lot. I was actually looking forward to it. Now tech is less than 15 minutes away from my high school, not really a long trip at all. So I was driving down the road and somebody turned and I first caught sight of a Ford. It was swerving around and I could see in the driver's window that it was an old man who was alone. He was just waving something with the music and I paid no attention. A little further down the road, someone else in front of me stops to turn. We're at a dead stop, waiting for the other lane to clear so the guy ahead can cross. I had my window open as it was a pretty nice day. I noticed a guy behind me. He was staring at me through my rear view window, pointing previous objects at me, lunging it and actually yelling out the window at me. He was saying stuff like, "I hate you, you don't know how to drive." I instantly thought like, okay, this is weird. I'm just gonna wait for this guy to turn. I don't know what gone through my head previously in situations like this, so I just rolled up my window. My school is less than 3 minutes away by this point. I'm still a little paranoid and looking in my rear view at this guy heading down the road. I then see him take the object that I still can't figure out well enough what actually was and take it across to his throat as if he's slicing it and he's pointing it at me. He's accelerating, riding close to me and backing off. My heart starts racing because I don't know if this guy is joking at this point. I then figured that once I turned into tech, he wouldn't keep on driving. It was just a case of road rage. I'm still scared though, so I pull into tech and go towards a spot. The guy then whips in and parks directly behind me. I noticed some other students in their car beside me getting their books together, and I signalled them, saying like, "What the hell?" I mouth that I don't know back to them when they gestured back and I try and lock the door. The crazy old guy then comes up to my window with a knife, and he was actually waving that out the window at me the whole time. It's a huge Swiss Army knife. I have no idea how I didn't notice what it was originally. His face got so close to my window, his eyes were squinted and bloodshot. He had curly white hair with glasses. He was about 70 years old and a pretty bulky guy. He still looked scary though, and really angry. He told me to open my door and started trying opening it when I shook my head and saying no. He then takes a knife and scratches a big X on my window right where my face is at his point of view. He then pressed his hands against my window and pulled my window down a few inches. I'm freaking out now. My window was only open for about 2 or 3 inches due to my rain guard, but I was still scared. I took my seatbelt off and started backing away from the window, but I didn't want to get out of my seat, and this guy could have easily chased me around inside of my car. He then scratches the knife in the window inches from my face. I can't roll the window back up, and he's screaming that he's gonna slit my throat like babies and children's and their mothers in Vietnam. How I'm just a stupid idiot who needs to know her place, and other crazy stuff like this. I was truly scared at this point, and I started backing away as far as I could in my seat, but in a way, after what I just went through, I started to not care. In my mind, he wanted a reaction, and I wasn't going to give him one. I eventually just started saying, "Do it, slit my throat. Come on, is that what you want?" With the straightest, most unemotional face that I could possibly muster. At this point, he's getting confused. He's still waving the knife at me, but it's only 5 or 6 inches away from my face. He can't get his arm through my window any further. He's still shouting at me and calling me really nasty words, and saying how he's gonna kill me and make me pay. I stare at him for a while with no reaction to what he's saying. I think he realised that whatever he wanted to happen wasn't going to happen, so he took his arm out of my window, saying he'll find me, he's still going to kill me, he knows where I am, and other profanities about my mum. He then walks back into his car and speeds off, hitting a student's car in the process. It took me a few seconds to come back to reality. The girl in the car next to me looks back as if to say, "What the hell?" All the other students who arrived when I did stayed in their cars after realising what was happening. I get out of my car and so did everybody else. All of the other students then rushed over to me and apologised, saying they were too scared to do anything when they saw he had a knife. I don't blame them, really. That's what I wanted them to do. While this was happening, one of them phoned the tech principal to let him know what was going on. The tech guy called the police and they took my statement. The cops kept asking me if I cut this guy off, brake checked him, and if I knew him, etc. I said no. I didn't know anything about him, and I'd literally never seen him before, and sadly tech had no cameras. I do realise that maybe my reaction was bad. I've had people telling me that I should have just put my Jeep into drive and ran him over, or just left the school completely. I think after what I just went through though with my dad, I didn't want to see any more death. Even though this guy actually did something to me, I didn't want him to target other students if I left. I was also not allowed to have a weapon myself being on school grounds, not even a can of mace. Tech ended up letting me go home. A few news outlets wanted to interview me, but I had enough, so they still did a run-up story without me that night. 2 days passed and it's now Sunday. The cops called me and say the guy has turned himself in because he saw the story on the news. It turns out that he was a Vietnam veteran, and when the police went to his house, he had a shrine of war and a whole war room and stuff. We had to go to court. They say that because he's a vet and he had a flashback, he was temporarily delusional. He was then made to complete an ARD program and stay 600 feet away from me at all times and pay for the scratched window. I was pretty upset by the verdict. I do respect veterans to every extent, but you can't be on the road if you're doing stuff like this. I still do see him around at the store and gas station, etc. I'm not sure if he remembers me or not. Every time he looks at me, I don't know what his intentions are, and it's normally just a glance, but I do feel bad for him. He didn't deserve what war did to him, but he also didn't deserve to do what happened to me. I hope that one day he overcomes his trauma like I have. It just made me paranoid every time that I see drivers in my rearview mirror. Caramel the Maintenance Guy by Mysterious1. Years ago, when I was still a young mum, I became friends with a couple who lived a couple of doors away, the maintenance guy C and his wife. My daughters called him Caramel because it was close to his name and seemed to amuse them. Anyway, shortly after we met, Caramel's wife left him, and somehow I become his shoulder to cry on. He He would tell me how he parked in front of the house where she was living at for 4 hours just to give her roses, despite her telling him not to contact her whatsoever. No matter how much I told him he was never going to win her back by refusing to respect her request, he kept on doing this. Eventually, he gave up wooing her back, I suppose, and we remained friendly, but I didn't see as much of him. I did ask him for a lift to go see my boyfriend who was in hospital. I did not have a car and it was a hot summer day, so I didn't really want to walk the 2-mile trek each way, so he dropped me off. After my visit, I walked home as I originally planned, arriving home in time for my ex to drop off my daughters, all of these whom were kindergarten age or younger. The following day, I was out of cigarettes, my youngest two who were napping, and my 5-year-old was awake. I admittedly didn't use good judgment when I walked across the way to my neighbours to bum a cigarette, even though that I was still going to be able to hear them if they started crying or anything. I was out for a good 3 or 5 minutes, and as soon as I got home, my daughter told me Caramel had called while I was gone. I called him to see what he needed. "Hey, yeah, how come you didn't call me yesterday?" he asked me. I told him I didn't need a lift home, and after a minute or two of conversation, I hung up. As I did, my daughter said, "Mum, I don't know if you want to know, but I think you want to." I then said, "What is she talking about?" When Caramel called yesterday, he said that he liked to take off his clothes and do weird stuff, and do I want to watch? Obviously, that was the end of my acquaintance with Caramel, but it was not the end of the story. I filed a report to the police, but they couldn't really take action because he still hadn't committed a crime. And I told my apartment manager and he was fired. However, in the months that followed, my daughter started saying odd things when she woke up at night. She'd always awaken at night or go to the potty or get a drink in her semi-conscious state, and then she always settled back to sleep instantly. But now she was telling me how that Caramel talked to me at the window, and she said this on several different occasions. I always went right out though to see if anybody was there, but there never was. I did always wonder if it's just her imagination, but every time she had said it, she told me that he said he would be her friend if she let him in, and it happened every time she said he was at the window. It was scary, but I felt confident enough. After all, I was always home at night and would always do anything to look after my daughters. These things never happened before midnight though, and I was always up until later than that. The one night I hired a babysitter while I went to dance with my boyfriend. We come home at around 10:30 or so, only to find the police at my apartment. An unidentified male had tried to convince the babysitter to open the door to him. He had then yelled at her when she wouldn't actually open the door to him, and he had walked around to the patio and started wagging his tongue at her through the window, so she decided to call the police. My oldest daughter then said to me, "That's him, the Caramel man, Mum." So, even after 2 police reports, it still didn't end. The final incident was when I awakened to loud pounding at my front door. I looked through the peephole and it was a police officer. I invited her in, and she said they received a phone call about a man looking into one of the windows of my apartment, and that was my daughter's room. She said the caller had apparently startled him and then he ran, but the caller was able to get a license plate number. "Do you know a man named?" and actually said his real name. That was the last time he messed with my family, but it was not the last time I heard about him. My boyfriend ran into him at a convenience store a few months later and said Caramel acted like nothing had happened and that they were just great friends. I really hope that this can all just come to an end. Always Lock Your Doors by Rosie1124. I work on a small dairy farm in the upper Midwest. It kind of has a weird layout, but I'll try my best. Right when you walk in, there's a milk house, and then you keep going and you're right in the parlour. Once you go to the edge of the parlour, you can turn left into our calf barn, or right and make your way out to the big barn where the cows are being milked. I should also mention that we do have a calf barn that is also connected to an older barn that we keep pregnant cows in. The doors are never locked because we have people coming in and out at random times throughout the day, plus it's a barn, and there are doors literally everywhere. Anyway, I'm a female who is fairly tiny. I'm about 5'5" and 120-ish pounds, but mind you, I'm still in high school. So anyway, one night, I was working the night shift. Now, this is anywhere between 8:30 and 2 AM, because you never know how long the barn might take. Every shift we worked, we would have one other person, and this happened to be with one other high schooler about my age who's a bit taller than I am. So anyway, every shift, we milked the first pen, then I'll go into the calf barn and turn the lights on and start the pasteurizer so I can feed the calves. So I went and did just that, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary, and I went back to help milk the second pen. After the second pen, I wanted to feed the calves. So here's a layout of the calf barn. There's an alley down it with the weaned calves on the left and hay and grain on the right for feeding them at the end, and that's in a big room. There's a row of 7 hutches right as you walk in from left to right, and then 2 in the left corner, and then there is 6 pens and 3 on each side with a little milk house in the middle for feeding purposes. The doors to the milk house are always closed to keep it warm in there, so I go in there and start my normal feeding routine, and I don't notice anything strange. Then I open the door to the other side of the milk house to feed the 4 pens, and that's when I noticed the older, almost weaned calves in the right hand side of the pen acting very scared. I ignored it at first and I went about what I was doing. Then I saw him, a man, huddled in the corner of the pen, just sitting there in all black. But he just sat there, not doing anything, just looking at me, smiling. In those far 2 pens is a double door that again isn't locked, making it very easy for anybody to come in. I was holding a 5-litre bucket filled with milk and I dropped it, spilling it all over the ground. I have never booked it as fast as I did out of there. I then told my co-worker what had just happened, and we both ran out and hid in the break room for a little bit with our barn dog. Eventually, we got the courage to go back and check it out, but the man was gone and the double doors were wide open. Thinking back on it, we should have just called the cops on him for trespassing, but he never threatened us or the cows or anything. I don't know if he was just a homeless man looking for shelter out of the cold, but my barn is a tad far out of the way for that. What scares me about this though is that day I walked in there a few other times and I didn't even notice him, so I have no idea how long he'd been there watching me. I worked 2 night shifts since then and I work another one tonight. Since then, I've been sure to make sure that the barn is actually clear and to check all the doors when I'm feeding. I still don't know why he was dressed in all black either. I really just hope that I'm never gonna see him again. All because of a blanket by Bitchin' Donuts 127. This happened last July while me and my boyfriend's family were on vacation in Carolina Beach, North Carolina. Every year, my boyfriend's family rents a pretty nice beach house for a week around July and takes a vacation. This was my first year being invited and it's absolutely beautiful. It's peach colour with 4 bedrooms and it's only a block off the beach. The house also sits on what looks to be stilts, and you can park your car underneath the house. It's completely open below the house, so it's not really a garage. We parked our car down there. There was also a table for hanging out, a laundry room, and a private enclosed outdoor shower down there as well. The house had 2 upstairs porches that were just a walk up the steps from the car to get to the porches and leading into the beach house. Now, directly across the beach house is a little mom and pop restaurant. To the left is a gas station, and to the right is a 24/7 laundry. The main porch is facing the restaurant. You can see all of these places from underneath the house and the porch. It's still pretty open. This is normally a pretty quiet touristy town as well, and the family has been coming here for years and never had the same issue before. So it's our next to last day on vacation, and the landlord to the house has always been good to the family. So we washed all of the bed sheets for him, including a heavy down comforter that needs to go to the laundromat instead of our washer and dryer. My boyfriend's mum and I take the blanket over to the laundromat at around 10 PM. We then stay by the laundromat on the porch to make sure that nobody comes and steals our blankets. We're checking on the blanket and it's taken way longer than we originally thought. It needed to be washed twice on the longest setting to get clean apparently. Now by the time we put it in the dryer it's 1 AM. So somewhere between 10 and 1, a maintenance guy shows up and he's working on a few of the machines. He's nice enough. He says, "Hi, how are you?" And he says, "Don't use these 3 machines as they've been running badly." We go back to the house and the family joins us, all sitting on the porch drinking, talking about how we are about to leave and generally having a good time. It's about 2:15 AM now, and my boyfriend's mum asked me to go check on the blanket and run it for another time if necessary. I have a bad feeling though about going back. I just blame this on the booze and asked my boyfriend's dad if he could do it. My boyfriend's dad's a pretty huge guy and he's scary as hell if you don't know him, so he says fine and goes and runs it for a bit longer. Now, my boyfriend and I are pretty heavily into marijuana. His family doesn't care, so we go to our private outdoor shower, lock the door and just smoke in there. There's a seat in there separated from the shower part, so we just chill. A few minutes later, we hear some loud banging from the laundromat, and we go out and see that the maintenance man is still there. We say whatever and go back to smoking. And at exactly 2:27, I know because I was on my phone, we hear someone scream in a panicking voice. We then step out of the shower room to investigate and see a man booking it across the street towards our house. He cuts through our yard and runs right across next to the shower. The maintenance guy then runs to his car and turns down the road away from our house, hits a parked car, continues screeching down the street and finally wrecking. We can't see the car, we just hear a loud crash. We went upstairs to everybody on the porch and we're like, "Did you see what just happened?" They did, and they then called the police. They did eventually arrive within 5 minutes though. One cop goes down the road to the accident and there's a shoe and some other stuff lying on the road. The laundromat door is still hanging wide open. The police tape off everything, and being so close, we hear them radio that there's blood everywhere and they need to call others. 2 more cops show up and now there's 4 of them in this laundromat parking lot. We give them our story. They cannot physically write most of us as witnesses as we've been drinking, and they couldn't be certain of what we had seen. They started searching for weapons where the one guy ran, which was mainly through our yard. Me and my boyfriend are freaking out because not only did we smoke a lot in there, but we were also worried because the guy literally ran right past where we were. The cops didn't update us on anything at all. We got some looks from them from the smell, but they didn't say anything. After they completed their investigation, we see a cleaning crew come out and they lock the laundromat doors and we go and get our blanket. What we see in the newspaper the next day is that a homeless man came in and stabbed the maintenance guy and was trying to rob him in the process. Then, when the maintenance guy managed to get a good swing on him, he ran out and away towards the beach. The police found out the homeless guy was staying a few blocks away. I'm guessing that the maintenance guy was trying to get to the laundromat's owner's house. I'm not sure why. Also, a few blocks away in the other direction, I don't know why he got into his car. The maintenance guy got taken to hospital but was okay. The homeless man obviously got taken to prison, and I'm really glad that I asked my boyfriend's dad to go check on that blanket, because I literally would have only missed a commotion by like 20 minutes. Had I have went earlier, I definitely could have got stabbed.